Thank you. Please be seated. And Mr Duckworth, I just remind you that your affirmation that you made yesterday continues.
Yes.
Yes, Mr Futrell.
May it please the Commission. Mr Duckworth, I'd like to start this morning, if I could, with taking you to a document in much the same way as I did took you some documents yesterday.
Yes, okay.
And the first document I'd like to take you to is the reference is GWC .0002.0016.0150 at page 57. Again, I'll make it easy for you by handing a copy to you. It's an agenda, it should be an agenda paper from a meeting in June 2015. Again, you may have had an opportunity in the last couple of days to re-familiarise yourself with that document. What I'd like to do, if I may, is draw your attention to the attachment, which is attachment 1 to the paper. And I have some questions about some of the matters referred to in it. The first, and if you need time to reread it and think about it before you answer the questions, feel free to do so.
Okay.
So the first part I'd like to draw to your attention is under the heading, there's a heading that says how the Commission will achieve these objectives.
Yeah.
And in the second paragraph, there's a statement, the officers from the department conduct casino compliance and related activities that meet the compliance strategy objectives of the Commission. And then it says, and the objectives of the department strategic plan.
Sorry, second paragraph, is it?
Second paragraph under the heading, how the Commission will achieve these objectives.
Guild accredited testing facilities. So it's relating to testing facilities, is that right?
Well, if you don't have a clear recollection of the paper, that's fine. I'm going to ask you some questions about what you understood the meaning to be of the strategic objectives of the Commission and the strategic objectives of the department at the time.
Okay, right.
The paper itself, you'll see from the first page, concerns the casino compliance strategy for 2015-2016.
Is this on here, sorry? Or?
It's on the first page. If you look at it, sorry, you may not have the right.
All right, okay.
If you have the document in the top right-hand corner, it should be 0016.0150, and the first page will start with underscore 0001, and then if you move, it should be in front of you, Mr. Duckworth.
0057. It says.
And then 0057 is what I'm directing your attention to.
Oh right, okay.
So you'll see that the title of the paper is Casino Compliance Strategy for 2015 and 2016.
Yeah.
And then there's a reference to, as part of the operational planning process, compliance strategy was then being devised. If it's easier for Mr. Duckworth, it's in the paper I handed to you in front of you, on one of those papers.
Okay, I'll find the paper. I'd rather just have a bit of a look at it. 1 003 037.
It might be easier if we take back the ones I've given you that you don't need anymore. So
all right.
just work with the one you've got. Do you want help with him?
I don't know which they are.
So this is one from today. Which one are we on today?
So it ends 0150.
0150.
Okay, so we don't need this. We don't need this.
that's mine.
It's yours.
Another copy.
Take this. And we will take this. And we will take. Okay.
Okay, this one. Right,
Page.
That's just you don't mind hand.
that's it,
That's
okay.
it? Okay, good.
Right.
You can, thank you. Sorry about that, Mr. Duckworth. So
No, that's okay.
there's a recommendation that the Commission resolved to approve the 2015 and 2016 casino compliance strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And what then follows is a brief description, and then attachment 1 is the document titled Casino Compliance Strategy.
Yep.
Looking at it now, is it one of the documents you've had a chance to review in the last few days?
I'm trying to think, probably. Sorry, I can't be more definite, but I'm sure I would have seen it in the last few days. And I do remember the compliance strategy, yeah.
All right, so that was really going to be my first question. So you remember this event, coming up with the compliance strategy in the middle of 2015?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so if I could just draw your attention back to that paragraph, then the second paragraph under the heading, how the Commission will achieve these objectives.
Yeah.
And there's a reference there to a strategic objectives of the Commission and the objectives of the Department's strategic plan.
Yeah.
Now, what was your understanding at the time of the strategic objectives of the Commission?
Well, pretty much as laid out there. I mean, it's to strategic objectives of the Commission, promote and maintain compliance with legislation, ensure fairness, integrity, basically see that the conduct of gaming is done in accordance with the regs and the necessary rules. Ensure that things like licensing of employees is correctly done, that there's a system for reporting and penalising infringements of if employees don't. Well, that's basically it.
Okay, and did you have an understanding at that time of what the objectives of the Department strategic plan were?
Well, I didn't actually see the department, or at least I may have done, but I can't remember the department's strategic plan. But their plan would be, I guess, to ensure the efficient use of their inspectorate to ensure that the conduct of gaming, both at the casino and in the community, was being carried out as it should be, and to take any steps to report and remedy anything that, or report to the Commission any cases where this wasn't happening. So I mean, they are basically a regulatory department. That their strategic plan would be how best they can carry out that regulation, given their brief. Okay,
now you mentioned in there something about efficient use, I think, of resources, which I want to come back to. But before I do, because I just draw your attention to the last paragraph under the heading, how the department will achieve these objectives.
Yeah.
And there's a reference then to, in order to achieve the objectives of the strategy, the department will develop operational plans and management practices to ensure essentially the outcomes.
Proactive respect. Yeah.
To your knowledge, were operational plans and management practices developed by the department and brought to the GWC for its consideration?
I think to some extent, certainly they were brought to the GWC for consideration, particularly the the question of the use of inspectors, for example.
Okay, I think I know what you're referring to there, which I'll come to in a moment.
Yeah.
There is, for reference, if I could take, we could move now to a different agenda paper. This is for a meeting in August 2015, and it's at GWC 0002.0016.0155 at page 17. Now, what I might do, you don't mind,
Yep.
retrieve the other one. So
This one? Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Futrell, if you just ask Madam Associate here
Yes.
to retrieve it, then she will do that.
Right,
to
thank you. Sorry.
Save you from having to leave the bar table.
Thank you. Now, this may have been one of the papers that you were just referring to in terms of things that came back to the GWC for consideration. So, again, I just want to draw your attention to some parts of this, and then I want to ask you some questions about it. So, the first is that there's a recommendation to endorse the approval to remove a dedicated inspectorial presence of 20.5 hours a day from 1 September 2015.
Yep.
And then the paper sets out some explanation and reasons for that recommendation. The part I'm interested in is on page 0019. There's a paragraph immediately above a heading, Proposed Regulatory Approach, that refers to continuing pressures relating to the allocation of scarce Inspectorate resources and in managing salary and operational budgets has meant more changes are inevitable.
Yeah.
I just ask you to hold that in your mind, and then if I could take you to the minutes of the meeting. It's just an extract. Sorry.
Oh. Sorry.
It's a demarcation I wasn't.
Thank you.
I'd forgotten about briefly. Now,
Yeah.
There seems to have been a larger explanation of that at the meeting, and if I could just draw your attention. So on page 2 of that document, which is at GWC 0002.0016.0156_0002.
Yep.
So there's a paragraph at the bottom of that page that explains that the department is under considerable pressure to operate within its salary limit, etc.
Yep.
So the question I have for you is: was it your understanding that one of the driving reasons for the recommendation to change or remove the inspector presence from the casino at the time was one of financial constraints, or was there some other reason for it?
One of them was certainly financial constraints, yeah.
So I have, in respect of that, and I think we dealt to some extent with the budget of the GWC yesterday, and one of the sources of its funding being the licence fee it recovers from the casino operator, or the casino licensee.
Yeah.
But my question really is, what impact, if you like, what budget constraint was there on the GWC in terms of its ability to fund its operations when it had a source of funding from the casino itself?
I don't know that there were any constraints on the GWC per se. This is where the interlinking with the department is sort of grey area, I guess, because it seemed that the saving was being made for the sake of the department.
Well, that really is my point, or my question is,
Yeah.
if it was a saving for the department, or from its budget, within your budget you had an allocated amount for the services that the department would provide.
Yeah.
So was there any debate or discussion around, well, we have our own funding for these services, we would prefer that you continue, for example, to stay in the casino itself?
No, but because we were pretty much convinced that the standard of electronic surveillance and, frankly, a more efficient use of people power in the casino was a compelling argument. I think the original Inspectorate sort of contingent had started in the 80s or 90s and hadn't changed a lot since. There was a bit of an occupational culture, I believe, where it was seen as the inspectors themselves used to get a fair amount of overtime and so on. And there was a look at that, this is how I understood it at the time, looking at all that, together with the very significant advances in electronic surveillance and IT stuff generally since those days, it was concluded that just as in other spheres of life where surveillance has gone from people walking around or whatever to cameras and people in rooms able to scrutinise in minute detail what's going on, that if the system at the casino was of that type, then there was a very compelling argument that, and the Commission was very keen that there be still a human presence, but perhaps not such a large or full-time human presence as had been before. And I'm convinced that that was the overriding argument.
Okay.
Now, there may have been arguments from people who had the dual role of being department and commission who were more interested in possible savings, but the commission members themselves thought, why should we be an organisation where large numbers of people are walking around when state-of-the-art cameras can capture this sort of stuff very well? And I remember a sort of a visit to the casino, them showing off this hardware and saying, look, we can sort of count the spots on a card at 100 paces sort of thing. So to be really fair to the Commission, it was convinced that we had a superior system being proposed. And if it made savings, so be it.
And was it your understanding or expectation that the Commission itself would make those savings?
Look, I'll have to confess, I didn't give that detailed thought. I really didn't consider that.
Was there any discussion from other members of the GWC at the time?
I don't believe there was, no.
No. So if there was a consideration of financial benefit, you didn't turn your mind to whether that would be the GWC's benefit or to the benefit of the department?
I considered that the benefit would be to the department. I thought that would be the outcome. Yeah.
And just to, I guess, summarise what you said, and again, if I don't do this accurately, please feel free to disagree with me. The GWC was content to have the change because it considered that the level of surveillance would remain essentially the same via the electronic
more than happy,
mechanism.
I would say, yes. It wasn't just, okay, it's all right. It was, this looks better.
So it was a win-win.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I'd like to move to a slightly different topic now. You'll no doubt know what I'm talking about when I talk about the ABC Four Corners program that aired in 2014?
Now, was that the news? There's two show programs. wasn't
Yeah,
there?
this one was titled High Rollers, High Risk, Australian Casinos and the Threat Posed by Organised Crime was the title of the article.
Right.
Do you
Yes,
remember?
I do. Yeah, I recall that. And then later on, there was a 60 Minutes, wasn't it? So try and keep them separate in my mind.
And do you recall that one of the central features or the allegations in the program that was aired was that there was a link between junket operators in Macau and organised crime groups, and that and essentially Australian casinos who were operating with those junket groups.
I remember that, yes.
Did you have the time, or did you watch the program in the ABC program in 2014?
I did, yeah.
And as a member of the GWC, were the allegations in that article of concern to you?
They were, yes.
And was it raised in any of the GWC meetings?
It was, yeah.
And what was the outcome of the consideration of that topic at the meetings?
There's great concern, but I have to say, for some reason, it was let's wait and see what it brings forth. And at that point, there seemed to be no, and I'm part of that, no real concern that this might be going on right now in our own casino in Perth.
Okay, well...
So, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I heard that. So there was no real concern, you said, no real concern that it was going on in Perth at that time?
No, there wasn't, no.
Can I draw you again to attention to it? A paper was prepared by the department on this at the time. You may recall that. I'll take you to the paper. It's in the agenda for the December 2014 meeting. This is at GWC point 0002, point 0016, point 0121, page
Thanks.
53. Again, I don't know if you have had an opportunity to read this document, this paper before attending this week. But the question I really have for you is whether, you in answer to the question from Commissioner Jenkins earlier, you said that confirmed that you didn't have any concerns about it taking place in the Perth casino at the time. Was one of the reasons for you reaching that view the information you were receiving from the department about the way that the Perth casino was being operated?
I suppose it was more that we had no indication that there was any matter of concern. Nothing had been raised.
Do you recall this paper and reading it at the time, or
Sorry, the
paper from the Deputy Director General of 3 December, agenda item 5.2, International Commission Business, Crown Perth.
3.2, sorry. 5.4. 5.4. Without seeing the paper, is this the paper? No. Without seeing the paper, I can't say that I do.
The paper is there, Mr.
As part of this?
You may not have the right paper. It's on the screen at the moment.
Sorry. right. If I can just have a minute to read it, perhaps.
Certainly.
Thanks.
Mr. Duckworth, when you get
Yeah.
to the last bullet point on the second page, let me know and we can scroll to the
All
following
right,
page.
good. I get the gist of this, yeah. All right, so the bullet points at the bottom of the page, you want me to look at, yeah?
Yes, I'd draw your attention to those, and then I'm hoping to get the next page up so you can see that the final section of the paper.
Yeah.
Again, I have a couple of questions about this. Were you finished?
Okay.
All right. Now, again, having read it now, do you have a recollection of dealing with this topic at the meeting, at a meeting of the GWC?
Let me think. Not a very good one, but I'm sure, yeah.
All right. If I could just start.
I was at the, what's the date? I'm sure.
This was in December 2014, so yes, it is some time ago.
December 2014.
Yes.
Now, around that time I was overseas, but I don't know whether I was back there. Can I check the minutes?
Yes, the minutes. The minutes do record you were there.
All right, okay,
So,
yes, that's fine. Yeah, I do remember these, the substance of this, yes.
All right. Now, the question I want to ask you, if you could look at the page, at the foot of the page is a paragraph beginning in summary, and then there are a series of bullet points. The third bullet point refers to approve and audit policies and procedures for entry into ICB, which is the International Commission Business Programs, and the VIP gaming areas. That's one of the bullet points. And it's under the heading that the GWC officers conduct a range of activities relating to ICB. My question for you is, what if any understanding did you have then, or do you have now, of what the approve and audit policies related to the International Commission business was?
Well, I think after the 2010 decision that the Commission wasn't in a position to vet junket players and so on, that there was very little input from the Commission into the international players. As the paper said, there was the feeling that the federal customs and other authorities would scrutinise the people coming in, that the casino had processes for following up on backgrounds and accounts and so on, and that being as the Commission had relinquished the assessment of junket groups, then at this point in time, there was really not much of a role.
So the thrust of the article, the ABC article, was in spite of all those things, there was junket operators in Australia who did have those links to the Macau-based organised crime groups.
Yeah.
So the question really I have is, in light of that, was there any consideration given to your recollection of whether it's a field in which the GWC should re-engage to ensure that the other authorities were catching the specifically risks associated with the Perth casino?
No, it wasn't.
All right. Now, if I mention the China arrests, will you know what I'm talking about? If I
Yes.
make reference to that?
Yeah.
So you became aware, I expect, during 2016 that some Crown Group employees in China had been arrested.
Yep.
Again, was this something that, to your recollection, was raised during meetings of the GWC?
Yes.
And what was the nature of the discussion at the meetings on this topic, to your recollection?
Initially, it was to get someone to come from Crown as quickly as they could to give us a briefing on what it was all about, the basis of the arrests, and tell us whatever they could. I suppose bearing in mind that, strictly speaking, how Crown as a corporation operated in China was maybe not the business of the GWC, but we certainly had a strong interest in that. And we did get a follow-up whereby Mr. Preston came down and spoke to us about the incident.
And what's your recollection of his explanation for it?
Well, basically what he said was that China, the argument really was that China had changed the rules, if you like, that Crown Perth had been operating in China for quite a long period of time, marketing their casino, trying to attract players and so on. And suddenly he put it down to a crackdown by the Chinese government on Chinese people gambling and so on, gambling overseas, and that they were taken unawares, and what had been perfectly okay the week before was now designated a crime which merited arresting people who were doing it. That was his explanation at the time.
And was there, to your recollection, any questioning of Mr. Preston by the GWC members after or during his presentation?
Was there?
Questioning of Mr. Preston during the presentation?
Yes, there would have been. People wanted to know exactly what they were doing and why did it fall outside the guidelines of what China regarded as legitimate. And again, he came back to the argument he didn't know because it had been legitimate before, and he gave the idea as well that the people at Crown themselves were somewhat confused about why all this had happened.
Was there, after Mr. Preston had left, was there any discussion between the GWC members about or any concerns expressed about the Crown Group more generally in circumstances where its employees had been arrested and ultimately convicted of offences in China?
It's fair to say some people did have concerns, but it was sort of at arm's length. It was happening in China. There was a feeling of still at that point, let's see what else comes out of this. Because the other thing that Mr. Preston said, and which appeared to be the case, there was no real information coming out about the activities that these people were supposed to have done in any detail. I mean, broadly, he spoke about they were there marketing the Crown product and, trying to attract players, but there was no detail that we knew coming out of China saying exactly what they'd done. I mean, had they approached particular people or whatever? So we didn't really know. We're in the dark.
I want to ask you a question. I'm not suggesting that the two follow necessarily, but if a person is convicted of an offence in a foreign country, it might provide an indication of their character and the organisation's character, if you like, for the Crown Group. Was there any concern in your mind, or expressed by any other members of the GWC, that the fact that employees have been evidently operating illegally in China reflected poorly on the character of the Crown Group in Australia?
I didn't have a definitive judgment on that because I was somewhat persuaded by the fact that whatever they were doing before, the Chinese government hadn't objected, and now they did. Therefore, it could signify something about Chinese politics. Also, in the back of my mind were other non-casino type cases where academics or journalists have been sort of suddenly arrested for alleged offences and all sorts of things. So, personally, I was open to the idea that it was as much about what was going on in internal Chinese politics as anything else. And at this point, I didn't, in my own mind, have anything to suggest that Crown were doing anything differently from what they had a month before.
All right. So again, and if I just to summarise what I think you've said, and again, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong. Were you essentially satisfied, and you think that the GWC was satisfied by the explanations that Mr. Preston gave at that time, that they were caught out by a change in the approach by the Chinese authorities?
I think at that time people saw that as a reasonable case to put to us, yes.
Okay. Now, again, I'm going to ask you to look at another document which you should have, I hope, had an opportunity to review before attending. This is GWC.002.0016.039. It's an agenda item of a paper presented at the August 2018 meeting of the GWC, where what was produced to the GWC at that time was a copy of the Victorian regulator's sixth review of the licensee in Victoria, the Crown licensee in Victoria, under the legislation in Victoria.
Yep.
Again, I'm going to draw your attention to some aspects of it and then ask you some questions about it, the deliberations of the GWC at the time. But before I do, I guess first, do you have a recollection of receiving this report and it being considered at a meeting?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so under the heading, there's a major heading on page 0278, heading suitability. And there are two underlined subheadings, outcome and purpose.
Yeah.
And the summary by the author of this document is that Crown Melbourne remains a suitable person to hold a casino licence. And the purpose is to explore questions of general suitability.
Mm-hmm.
And then a little further down, there's an explanation, or in the second and third paragraphs under that heading, it identifies some failings in governance and risk management.
Yep.
And refers to 3 disciplinary actions that have been taken during the review period.
Mm-hmm.
And that there'd been a commitment to improve risk management and references to the AML and CTF compliance. Now, you understood that to be references to the anti-money laundering provisions?
Yes.
All right, now, a little further down, there's a major heading, areas for improvement.
Where are we? Credibility.
This is on page 0279.
Areas for improvement. Yep, got that.
And there are 3 headings: responsible gambling, organisational approach to regulation,
Mm-hmm.
and institutional governance.
Yep.
Then on the next page there is an attachment that summarises the recommendations of the Victorian regulator, and under recommendation 3, which is on page 0280,
Yep.
Effectively connected to the corporate governance observations,
Yep.
there's a recommendation that Crown assess the robustness and effectiveness of its risk framework and systems,
Yes.
etc. And then I just want to draw your attention to another recommendation on page 0283. This is recommendation 17 under the heading money laundering. And a recommendation that by 1 July 2019, Crown undertake a robust review with external assistance of relevant internal control statements, including input from AUSTRAC, to ensure that anti-money laundering risks are appropriately addressed.
Yep.
Now, given these were recommendations in respect of the operations in Victoria, was there any consideration that you can recall by the GWC of whether a similar level of investigation inquiry should be undertaken in Western Australia regarding the Perth casino operations to ascertain if the areas for improvement that have been identified in Victoria applied equally to Western Australia?
Yeah, I do recall a a kind of plan or strategy or review plan being drafted and put to the Commission, I think in connection with this incident, unless I'm thinking of the later one, in which a whole number of things were put down as needing revisiting and scrutinising to make sure that they were as good as could be.
Okay, now, can you put, is your evidence that resulting from this paper or this report, there was a recommendation to undertake some form of review of the Western Australian regulatory regime? Is that the gist
There
of what you're saying?
was, but just the doubt in my mind, there was this incident, and then very much later, I think, oh no, it was after I left the Commission, I'm thinking of the 60 Minutes business. Sorry, I'm just thinking out loud, trying to think where I saw this, but there was a paper put out recommending that a whole lot of areas be scrutinised.
I think I know the paper you're talking about, and actually in chronology it actually comes before this paper.
Oh, right.
I will take you to that. So,
Yeah.
So can we just focus on whether your recollections, anything came of this? So the 6th review by the Victorian regulator, was there anything arising out of that whereby, for example, the GWC considered that a deeper investigation was required into the corporate governance and the processes for effectively AML or money laundering processes in Perth were fit for purpose.
I can't recall now.
Okay, now I will come back to that other review in a moment, but before I do, you will no doubt recall that during 2019 there was quite a bit of media, a lot of allegations in the media made in respect of the Crown Group
Yep.
generally.
Yep.
And again, I'm going to take you to, I think this one's the subject of a non-publication order, so I'll need to ensure I don't read anything, or I'll just take you to the documents. It is GWC point 0002.0016.0283 at page 43. Is that the full?
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
Yes. Thanks. Page 43, yeah.
Yes. Now, I could just draw your attention to the agenda so that it puts you into the time frame.
Right. 2019 August. Yeah.
Yes, and you'll see, just if you look at the agenda, 6.4, there's an agenda item, junket processes.
Yeah.
That's the paper I've just shown you, and then it doesn't identify as under general business, but you might recall there was a presentation given by representatives of Crown at the meeting.
Let me just skim read this, if I may. Oh yes, I remember this paper, yeah. Yeah,
All right.
okay.
Again, to assist with, I've got some questions for you on this. So if I could also ask that you be provided with the minutes of the meeting and a copy of the Crown presentation. So the minutes of the meeting are GWC.0016.0016.0286, and the presentation paper is
Thanks.
GWC.0001.0009.0001.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Now, I just need to warn you that the parts of the contents of the presentation and the minutes and possibly the agenda paper as well are the subject of a non-publication order, so we can't identify the contents of them.
Part of another publication, did you say?
Yeah, so they're subject of a non-publication order of the
right,
commission, so
okay.
you can't read it out loud, as it were.
Okay.
You just need to read it to yourself, and I'll ask you questions about it
Okay.
without revealing the contents.
Okay. Right.
Now, if I could perhaps, again, just ask you to, if I could take you back now to the agenda paper, which is 6.4, headed, titled Junket Processes.
Yes.
There's a box that's got a recommendation.
Yeah.
And the author is Mr. Connolly.
Yes.
And there are a number of, there's essentially a large discussion and then a recommendation. Now, the recommendation ultimately was accepted. The minutes record that, and this is at page this is at GWC .0002.0016.0286 at page 3 under the heading 6.4 junket processes.
Yeah.
Now, question I have for you on this particular document is you see under the the resolutions there are really 3 items for noting and 1 item authorising
Right.
the department to explore the idea of a national framework for
Yes.
the approval and management of junket activities. I want to focus on the 3rd one, which is noting there are other inquiries being conducted.
Yes. Yes.
And I just want to understand whether there was any discussion at this particular meeting that you can recall regarding whether any other steps should be taken by the GWC, for example, undertaking its own inquiry, and what the nature of the deliberations were on that.
Okay. The general feeling, I think, was to go along with the idea that wait and see what comes out of in the end in Victoria as a basis for knowing whether over in Perth we would need to do more.
Do you recall whether at this time it was in your mind there was an inquiry in New South Wales as well?
I think it would have been in my mind, yeah.
What was any discussion or reasons debated for the wait and could call it the wait and see approach?
No, there wasn't. I mean, the reasoning was we might get more information coming out of the Victorian inquiry, which would then guide the GWC into any further action if necessary.
Did you understand at the time that the GWC had a power to undertake its own investigation if it chose to do so?
Yes, there was, but there didn't seem to be a feeling for that.
Beg your pardon?
Yes, I understood the power, but in general discussion, there didn't seem to be a feeling for that.
All right. So the existence of the power was discussed, but there wasn't a consensus for its use. Is that a fair assessment?
No, that's not. I can't recall whether it was discussed or not. Members obviously knew there was the power, but there was no suggestion at this point in saying, okay, well, we better start our own investigation.
Well, when you said that there was the feeling or something of worse to that effect, what did you mean by that?
Well, I took it that, like myself, other people would understand under the Act there was that power.
But then how did you gain the feeling or the impression that other members of the GWC were not inclined to exercise that power?
Well, because there's an expression, it was verbalised in the meeting, at this point, let's wait and see what else comes out of Victoria.
I see, I understand.
Sorry.
Now, do you have a recollection of the presentation being given by representatives of the Crown at that?
Mr. Preston, yes.
Mr. Preston?
I think he came with a couple of other people, but he was the lead. He gave the presentation.
All right. Now, if I ask you to look at the PowerPoint slides, which is GWC .0001.0009.001.
Yep.
And I guess first, is that, to the best of your recollection, a presentation that was given at the meeting?
Yeah.
And was it given by way of a PowerPoint process, or the slides handed to you and talked to?
I actually don't remember. I mean, I think given that he's done it on a PowerPoint, I would imagine it was a PowerPoint, but yeah, it's a strong delivery, yeah.
Okay. Now, were, to your recollection, there questions asked of the Crown representatives during the course of that meeting?
Yes, I'm sure there were, yeah.
Did you ask any questions yourself of the representative?
Can't remember. No, I didn't, but some other members did, I think.
And do you recall what the nature of the questions were?
I think it was someone that may have asked about, tell us more about the due diligence that you carry out. Others were, but it was more focused, I think it was more focused on the fact that Mr. Preston's opinion was that the media, it was a media beat up, and they'd made mistakes before. They'd identified a plane that was the wrong one, or even an individual who wasn't the individual they said they were. So I think there's some questions a bit about the veracity of the allegations that he was throwing into doubt.
And were you personally convinced by his explanations about that?
In the end, I was, yes. I started off being sceptical, but he was extremely persuasive. And I suppose it's one of those things, there's always a case you can go back to, and the media do a very good job, but occasionally there's someone's been wrongly accused or whatever of something, and in the back of your mind is sort of innocent until proven guilty, that it sounds plausible that this could be, particularly, dare I say, the nature of the show, which I think used to be a serious kind of fair show, but had become a little bit more tabloid over the years. And I suppose that influenced personally my view of things. Is this just a ratings sort of thing? I shouldn't have been as flippant as that, but sorry?
Are you referring now to 60 Minutes?
Yes. But no, he was very persuasive. And if people did have a small margin of doubt, it was, well, there's not enough to go on to suggest that it's other than the picture that he's portraying. I mean, we believed the examples he gave of, wrong aeroplanes being filmed or whatever it was. I can't remember the exact details. So it was a case of casting doubt on the veracity of the story.
And in your mind, at least, was that part of the reasons that persuaded you to wait until other inquiries had been completed?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And was that the subject of any discussion between the other members of the GWC that given the response by Crown, you were persuaded to wait rather than
that
taking
was the
extra
response?
steps?
Yes. Yeah.
Move on from that document, agenda item 6.4. I know it's not on the screens, but could I just see the other pages of that report? It's on my screen, so...
Yes, I think I know the page you might be looking for. Is this the one referring to April 2017?
No, I just wanted to see what else was in that document.
I see.
Agenda item 6.4.
Oh, agenda item 6.
It's on the Commissioner's screens at the moment.
Yes.
I just wondered whether right, and could I see the next page? And the next one, please. Thank you. Thank you. That's all I wanted to do.
Very well, thank you. Okay, now, Mr. Duckworth, I'd like to take you back, if I may, to one of the comments you made earlier about the review being conducted.
Yes.
I think you may have been making reference to a review that took place in 2017. And again, if I could think perhaps, Madam Associate, if you could remove all of the existing papers and exchange it for this one, which is GWC.0002.0016.0202.
Thank you. Sorry.
This is quite a big document. I'm not asking you to read the
Yep,
the
okay.
whole thing. There are a number of attachments to it.
Yeah.
The gist of it is it's a report identifying from the Deputy Director General in February 2017, and the subject matter is that in the first paragraph there's a reference to an instruction from the Director General to conduct a review of all gambling and liquor compliance activities performed by the department to assess the effectiveness of current programs and the processes and practices employed.
Yeah.
And a little further down the page there's a reference to a recent report by the Victorian Office of the Auditor General, and specifically in relation to casino supervision, the VOAG concluded in their report that the Victorian regulator had not paid sufficient attention to areas of risk in the casino's operations, such as the detection of people excluded by Victoria police responsible gambling and money laundering.
Yeah.
And he makes some comments about he's considering those comments unfair. But is this the review that you had in your mind when I asked you some questions earlier about the 2018 regulator's report on the
Mr. Connolly's review, sorry.
When a little earlier I took you to the Victorian's, the 6th review of Crown in Melbourne, and asked you some questions about the paper on that. And as a consequence of those questions, you said you thought there'd been a fairly wide review undertaken, but you weren't a little unsure of the timing.
Yeah.
What I'm asking you is whether you may have confused the two reports, and the report you actually had in mind was this Victorian Valuer General's report, and the review that came out of that Mr. Connolly was indicating would be undertaken in 2007.
Gosh, yes, that's possible. I'm really just thinking of the review that Mr. Connolly proposed. So, sorry, I can't be more certain than that.
If I take you to, again, I'll take you to a series of agenda papers that we've been able to identify that deal with this topic, hand them all to you basically and run through them, and it might assist you to provide some answers to these questions. So, can you collect them? And I'll read them. The papers for the benefit of the transcript are GWC.0016.0202, and I think the minutes accompanying that may have a non-publication on them. The next document is GWC.0002.0016.0212. That has a non-publication order in respect of it. The next few documents, I'm just going to give the last digits so that I don't have to repeat them. They all have the beginning 0002.0016 and they end 0.0215, 0.0216 and 0.0218. Have you got all those? 225? I've got it wrong. Start with 225. Where's that?
He's got 202.
225? 0225. Yeah. Sorry, I apologise, I didn't call it out, so. 225, yeah,
Yep.
got it. And what's this one? Don't need that one.
That one.
Okay. Sorry, just organising, marshalling our papers, Mr.
Okay,
Duckworth.
thanks. Keeping that one, am I? Or, I suppose, yeah.
I didn't identify this one. The first one I want to take you to is actually GWC.0002.0016.0225 at page 13. And I think this may have been you mentioned in answer to your question, a proposal or for review by Mr. Connolly.
Yes.
And you'll see this is agenda item 5.2, compliance review.
Yep.
And the recommendation is to note it. And again, if I could just draw your attention to some aspects of this under the heading background.
Yep.
The last paragraph on the first page talks about it being timely, considering the publishing of the Victorian Auditor General's report. And as a reference to many of the findings and recommendations may also relate to the compliance activities and processes in Western Australia.
Yeah.
And then there's under the heading purpose.
Yep.
So having reviewed that, is this the broad review?
Yeah, I
you
think
had
this
in
is the
mind?
one I had in mind, yes.
Okay, now, I don't want to take you to these in any great depth. I just want you to let me know if you can remember the effectively the process that was undertaken in this review and your recollection of the outcome. But to assist you in that, if I could take you to the September agenda paper. Okay. This is subject to a non-publication order. And note I don't need you to go through them in depth. Note the heading is Casino Revenue and Tax Verification Procedures. So that was the subject of a report by Mr. Connolly. Then in October, which is the next one, which ends 0215, if you have that in front of you. The
02150001. Is that right?
That's right. And then if you turn over the page, it should have the agenda paper there. Yes, there you are.
Matters to be actioned.
That's the first item, which identifies matters. Then there's the next item is the agenda for 5.2.
Mm-hmm.
Compliance review, table games and gaming integrity.
Compliance review. Sorry, on my matters to be actioned, compliance review 5.1, undertake review of community poker policy.
Mr. Duckworth, I have confused you. So in the top right-hand corner, the page number should be 0013. Is it the last?
No, that's 1, 2. Okay.
The last digits. I think I can see it.
Yes, compliance review, table games, gaming.
Yes,
Sorry.
so-
Yep.
There was a paper produced on that subject matter. So we have casino revenue and tax verification procedures, table games, gaming integrity review.
Yeah. Security and surveillance. Yeah.
The next paper, if you could find it, I mean, if you want time to read it, just let me know, it's the major paper ending 0216. which will be a separate, one of the separate.
I've got that.
Yes, and the page I want you to look at is 0012. So this was a report in November 2017. And the subject matter was compliance review, security and surveillance.
Yep.
And we don't have a copy, unfortunately, Mr. Duckworth, of the paper for December 2017, but we do have the agenda, which should be a separate sheet you have, which is 02181, and under the item 5.2 is a reference to compliance review, electronic gaming machines, integrity of gaming. It's probably a single sheet of paper there, or maybe two.
So,
That looks like it.
yep. So what number am I looking at, sorry?
You're looking at so this is just the agenda, and it's got business arising,
Yep,
5.2, compliance review, electronic game machines, integrity of gaming.
yep.
So I'm not entirely certain our records from the GWC are complete, but as best we've been able to identify, there are those four papers: the casino revenue and tax verification procedures, table games, gaming integrity, electronic game machines, integrity of gaming, and a paper on security and surveillance.
Yep.
And I appreciate, again, this is some time ago, but do you recall there being any other papers produced in the review dealing with any other topics?
Let me think. No, the only one that might have been, but would re-look at the responsible gambling issues. I think quite late in my term, as I remember, there was quite a lot of attention given to how effective the organisation that the casino funded was for people, and whether there's additional things you should have been doing. But I don't know whether that came into a paper or not.
All right, now, if I could just cast your mind back to the initiating one of the catalysts for this review, which is the Victorian Auditor General's report.
Yeah.
And the reference in that to the improvement, if you like, in terms of the regulation of the casino in Victoria by the Victorian regulator. Were you expecting, as a member of the GWC, that the review of the compliance in Western Australia would include some of the topics that were the subject of the Victorian Auditor General's consideration, namely money laundering and matters of that nature?
No, I wasn't.
Why do you say that?
Because of the view long held and expressed in other papers that other agencies bore the prime responsibility for money laundering, and that it was beyond our capability to do anything about it.
Did it not occur to you that if there were concerns being expressed about the regulation elsewhere in Australia who were adopting a similar approach, that was something that perhaps the Western Australian regulator should also consider reviewing?
Should have done, and
Well,
it
no,
was
essentially, did it occur to you, is all I'm asking.
it wasn't top of mind, no, but we were in this mindset of waiting to see what happened in Victoria.
Commissioners, that concludes the questions I have, Mr. Duckworth.
Thank you. We'll adjourn and come back at 11:30. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please be seated. Carefully. Mr. Ramananda,
No, thank you, Commissioners.
who's that? Who have we got? Miss Seawood. I couldn't see you. Sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Duckworth, I just have a few questions to ask you. In your statement, you spoke about there being a 3 to 5 yearly review of the Perth casino licence.
Yes.
And Mr. Future will ask you some questions about that. You were shown a document by Mr. Future, which we'll bring up on the screen now, GWC.0002.0016.0239 at page 277. Just while that's coming up on the screen, as part of your work on the Commission, departmental officers would sometimes bring you papers explaining what had been done in other regulators in other states.
Yes, I think occasionally, yes.
And in particular, the Victorian regulator, there would sometimes be a report concerning investigations or reviews at the Victorian regulator.
Yes, there was the Victorian report, yes.
Yes, and if you look at that document, should be up on the screen in front of you now. This is one of those papers I think you'll find. It's headed Crown Melbourne's 6th Review of the Casino Operator Licence.
Yes.
And if you look down under the recommendation box, the first paragraph talks about Crown Melbourne Limited holding the only casino licence under the Victorian Act.
6th review of the casino by the Victorian.
And it
Yes.
talks about that licence being granted in 1993 and expiring in 2050.
Right, yes.
And in the next paragraph, it talks about the Victorian regulator, in accordance with their Act, they conduct regular investigations and reviews
Right,
at intervals not exceeding 5 years.
right.
And then it goes on, this paper, we don't need to look at the rest of it, to give a report summarising what is in the Victorian regulator's report, and that then is attached. Do you think in writing your statement you may have got confused about the 3 to 5 yearly review in this regard? Do you think that perhaps it's the Victorian Act that requires their casino licence to be reviewed every 5 years,
Yes, that is possible actually, because that was in my mind, yes.
as opposed to the
Yeah,
Perth one? So if I was to say to you there's nothing in the legislation in Western Australia that requires the Perth casino licence to be reviewed every 3 to 5 years,
right.
would you accept that you instead have got confused and you're thinking about
I
Victoria?
certainly would, yes.
Now, if witness could please be shown document GWC.0002.0016.0001 at page 337. So just to orientate you, this is the agenda paper prepared by the department in February 2010 in relation to approval for amending the casino control regulations in relation to junket
Yes.
requirements. Okay. Do you have an independent recollection of what was discussed at this meeting in relation to this agenda paper?
My only recollection was that the scrutiny by GWC of junket operators was a very fraught and difficult process that hadn't yielded much up to that point in time for various reasons, like the police not being available if and when you needed them, no direct links from us, but with international crime fighting organisations. So that's my main memory of it. It was something that was there under the Act, but it was something which was not able to be done.
So then Mr. Futrell asked you a series of questions about this paper and what was written in it. Is it fair to say then that when you were answering a lot of those questions, you were reading the words and attempting to decipher and interpret them today.
Sorry, can you rephrase that again?
Mr. Futrell took you to various parts of this paper
Yes.
and asked you some questions about what it meant.
Yes.
Is it fair to say that in answering Mr. Futrell's questions, you were reading the words of this paper and deciphering them and interpreting them today as you sat there, as opposed to relying on your memory of what was discussed at the time?
Yes, I would say so.
Now, Mr. Futrell asked you some questions about the scope of the amendments that were proposed. Did you understand at the time that what was being proposed was a removal of all of the regulations that in any way dealt with the GWC's involvement in junket regulations?
No, I don't think so. I thought it simply meant that the GWC itself couldn't undertake the task of vetting and then approving, but that it would perhaps still have an interest in it.
And when you say or have an interest in it, what did you think would be left for the GWC to do?
Nothing except for the power in the Act, I guess.
So I think in your answers to some Mr. Futrell's questions, you said that you understood that other agencies would
Yes.
have a role.
Yes.
Austrac would have a role, or the police would have a role.
Yes.
So it was your understanding that the purpose of this recommendation was to remove any role that the GWC might have in relation to junkets, on the basis that other agencies had a role in relation to junkets.
Yes.
So you didn't understand there to be any individual regulations that might be left behind?
No.
No further questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr Malone?
No questions, thank you,
Thank
Commissioner.
you. Commissioner Jenkins?
Thank you. Mr Duckworth, I have a few questions to clarify things. In respect of that last issue that Ms Seawood has asked you about, do you recall whether in 2010 that you understood that in addition to the requirement that the GWC approve junket operators and their representatives before the junket operators and representatives arrived in Perth, there was also rules about the Perth casino operator advising the GWC about the details of junket operators and representatives when they did arrive, their names and details.
Sure. At the time I didn't, but subsequently I've found that that was the case, yes.
So was your evidence to Ms Seawood there that when you look at the recommendation, and I think it's on the screen in front of you, that the Commission consider amending the casino control regulations to remove the requirement for junket operators stroke representatives to be approved by the Commission, you thought that that was all that the regulations required? That is, that a prior approval? You didn't understand that there are other obligations?
Like the obligation of the casino to
Yes.
retain records and so on.
Yes, and indeed to advise the GWC about the details of junket operations.
I can't clearly recall what I knew at that time, to be honest, but
Right. Well, if you don't recall, that's
okay.
Now, just on some other matters. Firstly, in respect of the membership of the GWC, what is your opinion as to whether the Director General should be the chair of the GWC or whether it should have an...
Now, speaking today, I think it should definitely be an independent chair. And I suppose on my experience as being on the GWC, I was uneasy about the fact sometimes that you know, first of all, there was strong competition for the chair's time as a departmental head. The two-hat thing, I don't think actually was good. That's not to say that the chair, certainly Mr. Sargent, that for the longer term, Mr. Ord was new and was gaining knowledge, but certainly Mr. Sargent was very good in sense of he knew his stuff very well. He was good with providing information. He was good with perhaps bringing to the attention of members things that they hadn't thought of because they didn't have as much experience as he did. So I can't fault him in that sense. It's not a person criticism, it's a role criticism. I think it would be far better to have an independent chair who doesn't have to think about liquor licensing, you know, the next estimates in Parliament, whatever. So yeah, sorry, I went on a bit long there, but
That's fine. And do you think there should be a police representative on as a member of the GWC?
well, I gave some thought to this again recently, I have to say. It was my opinion, well, a police representative, depending on the kind of police work background they had, particularly if there's someone in financial or corporate or perhaps even fraud issues, would be an asset. But I also thought in terms, I suppose you probably don't want to hear what I'm thinking now, but in view of being called before the Commission, I've given these things a lot of thought. Some kind of forensic accounting person or corporate accounting person, someone who's able to, if necessary, go right through the maze of records and corporate charts and roles and so forth, and have an eye for knowing what's what. So I would say something with that kind of sort of forensic accounting, possibly police. I think the chair, or if not the chair, then someone should have extensive regulatory experience. Now, I guess Mr. Sargent did have that, but I think it's government or corporate regulatory experience, I would think.
And the evidence we've heard is to the effect that the GWC itself did not have any role in advising the Minister as to possible persons to be appointed, or even advising the Minister as to whether a person with particular skills should be appointed when a
that's
vacancy
correct,
arose.
yes, that's right.
And do you think that the GWC should have a role in doing either of those two things?
I think it would be a good thing. I think thinking of it as a reconstituted GWC, which had its own chair and so on, yes.
When you were a member of the GWC, were you aware that Mr. Connolly had friendships with one or more persons who were involved in, who worked for the casino and who were involved with the department in casino regulation?
No, I wasn't, but I'll qualify that, given that Mr. Connolly, I think at one time in his career, had worked as an inspector or some such in the casino. I surmise that he would have known a few people who worked for the casino, but I wasn't thinking in terms of sort of hierarchy type people, just other people he'd perhaps been an inspector with or that sort of thing in the past years, but certainly not. I didn't have any specific reference to specific individuals that he knew, no.
So you don't ever recall him talking about such friendships during meetings even?
No, he used to talk a lot about his leisure pursuits, but not particularly fishing and skydiving, but didn't say who he did those activities with.
Now, were you, whilst you were on the commission, were you aware that the casino, withdraw that. Were you aware that there was a direction issued to the casino, which was 3F, which permitted the casino to extend credit to international commission business players?
Yes, I was aware of that.
And how were you aware of that?
Well, just through, I mean, the topic would come up at a meeting or more than one meeting perhaps. I remember asking a question, either me or someone else asking a question, and the answer was, well, in all the big casinos these days, that's a sort of standard practice that the people coming in from overseas have access to loans if they need them.
So that was going to be my next question. Did you understand why that was permitted?
It sounded like that it was almost a case of, well, all the other casinos are extending that facility, therefore the local casino here should also be in the competitive sort of field of international gambling. They also should have that facility.
Do you recall who it was who told you that?
It's probably Mr. Sargent.
And in light of that power, did you think it was appropriate for the GWC to regulate the way in which that credit was provided, for example? So just so that you understand what I'm saying. Did you think that it was appropriate for the casino to regulate the extent of the credit that was allowed to be provided, or to regulate whether interest was payable on that credit, or to regulate the methods that could be used to recover debts arising from that?
I certainly think that the GWC needed to be kept informed about the extent or the level of the amounts and so forth that were in these accounts. I suppose in my own mind I hide that off then as saying, well, it's their sort of corporate business in a sense, how they manage these accounts, but the GWC needs to be aware of them and the extent of them.
And so was that information reported to the GWC?
Not on a regular basis, but I do have some recollection of there being some discussion of the sort of the extent of the accounts that they provided for these people. But beyond that, it wasn't like a regular agenda item.
Can I go to the issue of the China arrests? And you were asked about those and asked several questions about them. Were you, as a member of the GWC, satisfied that the explanations you received from either Crown or the department in respect of why those arrests had occurred?
At the time, yes.
And at that time, did you or the GWC consider getting independent advice rather than relying upon what you were told by Crown or the department?
No.
And after the Victorian did report on the China arrests, did you consider making the directions recommended by it?
I don't think the GWC did, no.
And did the GWC consider prohibiting junkets until more was known about the China arrests and why they had occurred?
Again, it was more of a wait and see strategy. I think the junkets started to fall off anyway because of that. I think from memory, they dropped off very substantially.
I now want to go to the issue of problem gambling and socially responsible gambling. Was minimising problem gambling an objective of the GWC?
Yes, to do what it could to assist in the minimisation of that. Yeah, harm minimisation.
And how did the GWC seek to meet that objective?
There's a couple of things. First of all, we want to get an idea of to what extent the measures that were in place, for example, like people deciding to seek to bar themselves from the casino because they felt they couldn't control their gambling, the number of barrings against people. We had a run of statistics. To be honest, they didn't tell us a great deal. There were a handful of people each month who were either self-excluders or were excluded on the basis that they were seen as problem gamblers. There was monies that went from the Commission to assist in provision of counselling services for problem gamblers. There were sort of promotional events to highlight the problem. There were limits on the amount of money people could withdraw from ATMs, and the ATMs to be a set distance from the gaming floor, so a few environmental measures of that sort. I mean, really, difficult problem. Always, gambling's legal. Compulsive gamblers often don't recognise when they should stop. Unless people self-report or seek assistance, it's difficult to sort of randomly or to get people to address their problems. But beyond those things, and I mean, to me, it was a small effort, and I suppose at the back of everyone's mind is that the casino, which is trying to get people to spend money there and to attract people to gamble. As a good corporate citizen, they want to be seen to be doing something about responsible gambling, but it seemed unlikely there'd be an all-out effort which would sort of dominate what they were doing.
So, in relation to that, in the time that you were a member, did the GWC ever sit down as a commission to establish a program of action to assess the extent of the issue of problem gambling at the Perth Casino, and then to have a suite of programs and strategies to address the problem? Okay,
there's some of that. It was a bit more piecemeal than what you describe. One of our members at the time was particularly strong on this issue of the harmful effects of gambling. I think based on the fact that a good friend of his had lost all his money and so on. And we did get Crown people from their unit, which looks at this issue, to come down and talk about what they were doing. There was a lot of quite heavy questioning, especially from Mr. Bovell. There was always an eye to making sure that there was no incentives to go to the casino. That was one of the things they weren't allowed to do. To train staff to try and spot, if you like, if people were compulsive gamblers. So there was a training program that was initiated by the casino so that all staff were made aware of the signs of compulsive gamblers. So there was a string of issues which didn't quite articulate into a full-blown integrated strategy, but there were a number of measures. Yeah.
And do you recall whether these were before or after the 6th review of the Victorian regulator, which was published in the second half of 2018?
Many of them were before that date. Yeah.
And do you recall after that report was published whether you looked at that, the GWC looked at that report and decided to endorse or not, or to implement or not, the recommendations about socially responsible gambling in that report?
Just remind me of the exact nature of those, but
Well, they included, that the casino should implement a new socially responsible gambling program, that it should monitor that program, that it should increase the number of people on the floor to identify problem gamblers. I mean, there's about half a dozen recommendations directed towards socially responsible gambling.
Okay. Now, a lot of those were actually being done. As I said, the staff had to undergo training, recognising on responsible gambling. There was the usual things like posters in strategic places, which provided contact points and phone numbers for various gambling help agencies. There was the on-site, or there was a small team on site at Crown who could arrange for counselling to occur with people. And this was, a lot of this was before the Victorian recommendations, so there were these things available. It was felt that, comparatively speaking, Perth Casino had some decent measures in place.
Thank you for that. Can I just move on to the last matter, and that is you gave some evidence about the paper delivered in August 2019 by Mr. Connolly about junket processes. The paper commences by saying that it was about reviewing current processes and potential improvements to reduce regulatory risks around junkets. You recall that paper?
Yes, I think so. August 2019, was it?
Yes.
Hang on. Yes, I would have been there. Yeah, I was trying to think.
Just what I wanted to ask you, I didn't want to ask you so much about the issue discussed in there, but rather the format in which it was put to you. And can I suggest to you that what it does is to basically set out Mr. Connolly's position in respect of this and what he thinks should happen, and then asks the Commission to make recommendations consistent with his position. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I think so, yes.
And as an alternative, do you agree that it doesn't, for example, as an options paper might do, say this is the issue, this is the factual background, these are the options which the Commission might have, this is my recommendation, but, it's your decision.
Yep.
And, for example, the options in respect of that particular issue might have been for the Commission to hold an inquiry using its powers. You were asked about that. It might be to wait for the interstate inquiries and do nothing else. It might be to wait for interstate inquiries or the results of those, but to suspend junkets in the meantime. Or it might have been, for an example, to obtain an independent an independent opinion
Yeah.
from an expert about the extent of the issue and what you could do about it.
Yeah.
You agree that that suite of options, and maybe even potentially more, were not set out in that paper?
No, they
And-
weren't, and that would have been preferable.
And, well, that's what I was going to ask you about, was the format. And did it ever occur to you that in receiving a report in that kind of format, that the GWC was sort of being led to the recommendations that the author of the report wanted the GWC to make?
I think that's a fair conclusion. Having said that, I mean, they weren't bad recommendations or suggestions, but as you yourself point out, Commissioner, there wasn't a suite of options to say, well, okay, that's one way you could go, but here's other things that could have happened. And really speaking, that would have been preferable.
Thank you, Mr. Duckworth.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Duckworth, I've got three topics I want to ask you about, and the first is conflicts of interest.
Yes.
You remember very early in your exchanges with Mr. Futrell, you said you did have a good idea about the concept of conflicts of interest.
Yes.
Then, just to see that my understanding of conflicts of interest and yours align, the conflicts of interest can cover a wide range of things. They might be
Yes.
financial, they might be personal relationships, they might be a predilection to a particular approach, a very wide range of things. Is that how you see conflicts?
Yes, and actual and perceived.
All right. Now, you then said that this was a standing agenda item in the GWC agenda,
Yes.
and I've done a random search. I've spent the last 5 weeks having enormous fun trawling through GWC agenda papers, and if you believe that, you believe in the tooth fairy. But I've taken a random sample of each year from 2010 through to close to the present.
Yeah.
And you're right that item always appears. From 2010 until May 2017, the heading of the agenda item is disclosure of pecuniary interests.
Right.
From May 2017 on, the heading is disclosure of any interests. Now, I'm just intrigued as to why that change was made. Was there any discussion, or are you aware of why that change was made?
No, I'm not actually, no.
All right, thank you. The next subject is governance, what I would call serious governance issues, and I realise that there's a value judgment involved in that. But this morning, you have been taken to 3 separate incidents. One was the 2014 Four Corners program, one was the China arrests, and one was the 60 Minutes program and the other media allegations around the time. The subject matter and the allegations in those in each of those incidents, would you regard that as those subject matters as being serious governance issues?
Yes.
All right. Now, in relation to each of those occasions, your conclusion was of the GWC was what I might call a wait and see approach.
That's correct.
Which, and this is not pejorative, is passive.
Yes.
As opposed to active. As you sit here now, and to the best of your recollection, can you think of any instance, any example where a serious governance issue which came relating to the casino, which came before the Commission was dealt with in an active rather than a passive way?
No, there's a couple of conduct issues, but not serious governance issues, no.
And is that because nothing that you would regard as a serious governance issue in that respect came?
No, I didn't see any issues that I would regard as serious.
All right, thank you. Now, the last topic I want to deal with you moves into a more hypothetical area, and it relates again to junkets. Now, just to set the scene, I understand your position to be that you appreciated that there was a risk link between junkets and criminal activity such as money laundering, but that the primary responsibility to identify and deal with that risk link lay with other agencies than the Commission. Is that correct?
That was the view I held, yes.
All right. Well, now, let me, this is a qualified proposition that I'm putting to you. If it be the case, and let's make it relatively time specific, because I'm asking you about your experience on the Commission after 2010, so after the regulations had been repealed.
Yeah.
And let's just take a point in time for the sake of the exercise and say it's autumn of 2017. If it be the case that a comparative study had been done and that it indicated that in relation to the regulatory oversight of junkets generally, Western Australia had the most lenient system of regulation of any of the jurisdictions in Australia. If that be the case, is that something of which you, in your capacity as a member of the Commission, would like to have been advised?
Yes.
Were you ever advised of any such study as that?
No.
And if there had been contact between officers of the department and Austrac about Austrac's oversight of the junket activity in Australia, is that something which you, in your role as a member of the Commission, would like to have been advised?
Absolutely.
And were you, as you sit here now, can you recollect advice given of contact between departmental officers and Austrac about the oversight of junkets?
No, I can't.
All right, thank you.
No.
Mr. Futrell, is there anything arising from that?
No.
Mr. Sadler.
Thank you, Commissioners. Just one question. Yesterday you were asked questions by Commissioner Owen regarding delegations.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I understand that you wanted to clarify or...
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Commissioner Owen, yesterday you, at the end of my session, you asked me about delegations, and you said you understood that I believed that there was prior discussion in many of the issues which then were delegated, or the majority of them. Now, after, probably because it's almost the last thing of the afternoon, I thought quite deeply about that. And my recollection is, particularly in the latter years, as more things seemed to be delegated, that there was probably rather considerably more issues which were done between meetings without reference to the GWC than there were with reference to GWC. Now, there were still some of the ones which were done after discussion. The type of thing would be there needed to be a communication, a letter or some other communication with an organisation, be it the bookmakers, the casino or whoever, stating a request or some points that needed to be made or something. arising from a discussion. And the usual thing then was that it would be thrashed out, and the conclusion would be, okay, we need to send this letter to Fred Smith, bookmaker, about late payment of his fees or whatever it is, and it needs to contain these points, specify this date by which we need to hear from him. Okay, organise that, and then send it off without bringing it back again to the Commission for final sign-off. So that's what I understood by some delegated items which were, if you like, worked through first, but then rather than saying, okay, when you've done all that, bring it back next time, we'll look at it again, and then if it's okay, it can go. We said we trust you to put this together as requested, and for the sake of expediency and time, action it. So I'm sorry I'm being rather long-winded, but those were the things that were uppermost in my mind. There's quite a few of those, but thinking of the, in my mind was the sort of agenda sheets and so forth, or the minutes, and I would say that there were more items delegated, predominantly of a very minor matter, I think, or procedural sort of stuff, without first saying to the GWC, oh, by the way, we need to do these. But they were listed for review in the next minutes.
Thank you for that.
Sorry for a bit pedantic, but
Thank you for that qualification.
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Duckworth, thank you very much for your evidence, which has been of assistance to us. And you're now free from the obligations under the witness summons. You're free to go, and we will adjourn for 5 minutes or so to allow for a changing of the guard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I think we have Mr. Raddis. Would you come forward, Mr. Raddis? Thank you. And could you give us your full name for the record?
Lee Thomas Radis.
And do you wish to affirm or take an oath?
I'll take an oath. I, Lee Thomas Radis, swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raddis. Please sit down. Now, Mr. Sharp. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong table.
Oh, yes, we haven't swapped given it was only a short break. Mr. Addis, you received a witness summons to attend at this Royal Commission.
Yes, I did.
As part of that summons, there was a request for a witness statement and some topics for you to consider.
Yes, there was.
And there should be a document in front of you on the table. Does that look like a copy of the witness statement you prepared for the purposes of this Royal Commission?
Yes, it is.
The front page is dated 25 May 2021.
Yes, it is.
And there are 21 pages
Yes, there is.
and 64 paragraphs.
Yes, there is.
I think there are two small typographical corrections you would like to make. If we start in paragraph 1,
Yep.
I think your precise job title is slightly incorrect. Can you just explain which word needs to be altered?
Yeah, my title is the Manager of Industry, Regulation and Education, Liquor and Gambling. So if we remove employment, we'll put education.
Paragraph 46. In the first line there, it looks like there might have been a typographical error. Which word needs to be removed?
Yes. Commissions, so just GW Commission's responsibility. So
Should ultimately it is the GW Commission's responsibility.
that's correct.
So, with those two amendments, is the contents of this statement true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, they are.
Text of the witness statement of Mr. Raddis, which is DLG.006.006.0006.002_R.
The witness statement of Lee Thomas Raddis dated the 25th of May 2021 and bearing the document identifier number that Ms Seaward has just read out will be admitted into evidence as an exhibit. Thank you. Now, Mr. Sharp.
Mr. Raddis, just clarified that your current job title is Manager of Industry, Regulation and Education for Liquor and Gambling.
That's correct.
We call up GWC 000200020013. So the document that I'm calling up is position details for Manager, Liquor and Gambling Regulation. I just want to ask you about whether this is the job description which applies to you now. Is that? Sorry, we'll just wait till it comes up.
Yeah.
That one? No.
Commissioners, while we're waiting for that, just been pointed out that I gave the wrong document reference number for the witness statement. If I could perhaps just clarify that it's DLG.001.0006.0001_R.
Thank you. I thought perhaps when you referred to the two, it was because there'd been a substituted.
No,
Fine. The admission of that document as an exhibit is to be altered accordingly. Thank you, Ms. Seawood. Sorry, is that document simply not coming up?
I'm not quite sure what the problem is, Commissioner.
Well, can you move to something else and then
yes.
come back to that?
In your witness statement at paragraph 5, you state that you were last appointed as Government Inspector pursuant to Section 9(1) of the Casino Control Act on 2 March 2012. Did you have previous appointments as a Government Inspector pursuant to Section 9(1) of the Casino Control Act?
Yes, I believe so.
And
It was our identifications got updated and it meant we got new cards, so that obviously got re-signed and that was the last date.
And when was the first date that you were
I
appointed as a...
couldn't tell you offhand, but it would
What
have
was
been
the year?
it would have been the year that I commenced as an inspector, which I think would have been in 2004.
So we're just going through your witness statement. You said that at paragraph 6, you said that you were seconded to the Office of Racing, Gaming and Liquor as an acting inspector in the Operations Division. Did that include any casino work at that time?
At that time, I wasn't introduced to casino regulation. It was as I became a substantive shift inspector, that was when I received that appointment under 9(1).
So then when you were an Inspector Level 3 in the Operations Division from June 2002 to February 2004, did that include any casino work?
No, it did not.
No. So when you became Shift Inspector Level 4 in the Compliance Division from March 2004 to January 2008, that included casino
Yes.
work? And you then continued doing inspection work through till 2008, or did you continue after 2008 doing inspection work?
No, when I was successful in gaining position as a senior inspector, compliance, my role as a shift inspector had ceased and I didn't perform audits and inspections from that day onwards.
So you were an inspector of the casino from 2004 to 2008?
That's correct. It was also conducting inspections in the liquor industry, wagering industry and community gaming as well as casinos. So there were 4 industries which I was involved in as a regulator.
And did you ever receive any formal training about regulating casinos and the regulation of casinos?
The training was in-house training from staff, from experienced inspectors. I was fortunate to have some training from a very experienced day one casino inspector, and she was very thorough, and that is. And it would have been, she's now recently retired over the last couple of years, but she was a very good trainer.
And from 2004 to 2008, how many inspectors were there that would inspect the casino?
From that period, from what I can remember, we had, I think, between 18 to 21 inspectors on our roster, and we would perform, there were 2 shifts at the casino. It was every day. Our shifts were essentially 10-hour shifts, or 9.5 hours. They were called a day shift and a night shift. So you would perform generally 2 day shifts and then 2 night shifts, and every day of the year.
So there would be two inspectors there for the day and 2 inspectors there for the night?
No, sorry. There was 1 inspector who was on a day shift, and then at 5:30 or at 5 o'clock the night shift would commence. There'd be a half an hour where you'd do a bit of a handover and a bit of a chat and discussion, and the night shift would work till 3 a.m. So it was really 1 during the day and 1 in the evening.
And what were the tasks that the inspector would perform at the casino?
Well, there were various tasks, but our focus was broadly around 2 things, and that was around ensuring that the various controls and processes in place in regards to the collection of gaming revenue was recorded appropriately for the purposes of calculating casino tax. mainly the day shift inspector, that role provided a lot of focus around those matters, in particular attending the count rooms to do the 2 counts, the hard count, the soft count, the buys. And we had an independent software database then where we would record, after collecting various financial documentation from the casino licensee, and enter that data into our software base and perform the tasks of making sure that they balanced for that trading day. The night shift would then come on and then confirm the figures that we would enter in our independent database. So there was a checker, and that was part of the night shift's role. The other side of our role was to ensure that the integrity of gaming itself was conducted in accordance with the numerous rules and regulations that were in place. So they were the 2 broad terms roles that we had. And we also dealt with matters of disputes that had occurred on the gaming floor. The casino directions required the casino licensee, security and surveillance, to advise us of any suspected unlawful activities that may occur. And they would contact the on-duty government inspector and notify us, and we would deal with it as appropriately as we could. And that was obviously within the realms of what our powers gave us under the Casino Control Act and the Gaming and Wagering Commission Act.
And you've referred to disputes there. What were the kind of disputes that you might deal with?
Patron-player disputes, essentially. If they were having an argument about something that occurred on the table in regards to questioning a rule, and generally casino staff would try to resolve these matters, but there were times where they'd ask for the government inspector to be that person to, step in, examine the footage and give some advice in regards to the outcomes. So that was at a time when we were there, obviously, every day, bar that little gap in between after 3 a.m, where I guess it was intrinsic with the casino licensee and their staff that they knew that a government inspector was on duty, and part of their role to comply with the directions was then to notify us. So we always had that role, and they always knew whether it was security, surveillance or gaming staff that we were there.
And you've said there was one inspector on day shift and one inspector on night shift, that's correct?
That is correct.
And did you consider that staffing was enough time to do the tasks that were required to be performed at the casino for regulation at that time?
I believe so. As a minimum, yes.
And was there any other oversight of the casino other than the two inspectors, so the day inspector and the night inspector? Was there any other oversight by the regulator at that time?
Well, there was a regulatory team which was separate to the Inspectorate that had a role there within the department, and their role was mainly around the calculations of casino tax and other processing of amendments to rules and procedures. That's going back some time, yeah.
And so just to clarify, you said there were about 18 to 21 inspectors engaged by the department at that time, but it would be one would be at the casino at the day, one at the night, and then the others would be attending to other matters on behalf of the department. Is that how
That's
it worked?
correct, yes.
All right, well, I'll just take you back to the first question that I was asking you about. We call up GWC 0002 0002 0013. Excellent. This is a document titled Position Details for Manager Liquor and Gambling Regulation. It's got an effective date, you'll see, of 25 May 2020. The purpose of the position is said to be to lead and manages a team of inspectors within the Compliance Division to ensure the effective and efficient regulation of the gambling and liquor industries by allocating resources in accordance with the identified risk. Is this the position details which apply to your position now?
13819. That is my position.
What? Sorry, 13921.
If you look at manager industry and sector regulation, inspectors times 10, that
Oh, 13819.
I would think is my position, even though I know it might sound different to what my current title is. It's just my delegations that I have under the Liquor Control Act are as the title that I have now. So that's the title.
So just to clarify, your reference to 13819, that's the position you report to?
I manage those 10 inspectors. Well, there's 12 at the moment. So my title is, as I said in my statement, and that's because the delegation of powers that I was given under the Liquor Control Act are at that title. So that title I've remained in case I have to deal with prosecutorial matters. So I've remained with that title despite what it says in that document. I hope that's not too confusing, but...
So just to clarify, the position number in the top right, that's your position number? Is that?
No.
Well, that may have been previously.
So just what I'm seeking to understand is this document has a position number of 13921,
Yep.
but under reporting
Yes, thank you.
relation.
Yep.
Can you scroll down, please? Under reporting relationships has reports to 13819, manager industry and sector regulation. So this position reports to 13819. Are you saying that you are 13819?
Because the positions reporting to this position, the inspectors report to me.
But I think that
Yep.
my understanding of what this reporting relationships is conveying is that this position, can we scroll out and show the whole page, please? This position of manager liquor and gambling regulation, the reporting relationships for that position are that there are 10 inspectors reporting to that position of manager liquor and gambling regulation, and that the position of manager liquor and gambling regulation reports up to the manager industry and sector regulation.
There is no manager industry and sector regulation. I report directly to the director. There's only one manager, which is me, and I report to a director.
So do you understand that this position detail statement applies to your position, or do you understand that it does not apply to your position?
Well, my title isn't there.
So it's unclear whether this applies to you
It
or
would
not.
be unclear.
Unclear.
But reading the purpose, that sounds very much like my position.
Commissioner, I tender that document GWC 0002 0013 position details for manager liquor and gambling regulation effective 25 May 2020.
That document is admitted as an exhibit.
Next call up GWC 0002 0051. So this is the job description form for the Director, Industry Regulation and Education. Is that the job that you report to? Is that the position that you report to?
Yes, that is. That, yes, the level 8 is the director I report to, but that particular title is the role of Peter Minchin. He's the director that I report to.
So that's the...
Well, his title is Director of Liquor Control and Arbitration to confuse things even more.
Okay.
Yeah.
In that document, sorry, just to get the date of this document, the date of that document is at page 5. Can we go to page 5, please? So this is signed by the Director General on the 23rd of June 2017.
Right.
So this is a 2017 document. If we can then go back to the first page. At the foot of the page is positions supervised, so that I take to mean positions supervised by the Director, Industry Regulation and Education.
That's me.
Manager, Industry Regulation and Education Level 6, so that's your position.
Correct.
So your position's identified in
Yes.
this document
Yes.
as reporting to that
To that director.
Yes.
Yes.
We now turn to DLG 0001 0006 002 underscore R. Oh, sorry, Commissioner, I should have tendered this document. GWC 0002 002 0051, the job description form for Director, Industry Regulation and Education.
That document is admitted as an exhibit.
Can you call up DLG 0001 0006 002? Thank you. Now, at the foot of the page, there's work history, 2017 to present, Manager Industry Regulation Education, Liquor and Gambling Level 6. And under that is a statement, key responsibilities, and then can we have the next page, please? So then you've identified 5 dot points
Yes.
as your key responsibilities.
Yes. Thank you.
No, not there. Up, scroll up to the top, please. So those 5 you've identified as your key responsibilities in your current role.
Yes.
And then if we can scroll down to 2001 to 2017, you've identified various positions and then stated the key responsibilities, and it appears to me that the key responsibilities are identical to the ones that have been stated above. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
And the roles that you referred to in 2001 to 2017 range from shift inspector, liquor and gambling, to manager, liquor and compliance. So I just thought I'd clarify with you which of those roles had with them the key responsibilities which are listed there.
The first 3.
The first 3, so the manager, liquor and gambling, manager compliance and senior compliance.
Senior Inspector
Senior inspector
Compliance.
compliance, they all
That
have
is
those
correct.
responsibilities.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
the shift inspector was
Yeah,
a level
yeah.
4, so
Sorry.
different
Yes.
responsibilities. No.
Very good.
So are there now only 10 shift inspectors? You mean,
At present, 12.
at present 12.
At present, we have 12 shift inspectors.
And is that the full complement?
There are some vacant lines, so there's at least 2 and possibly more to come with retirements that are imminent. So we've reduced over the years. From the last count, it was 18 shift inspectors when I was commenced that role, and over that period of time, inspectors had either retired, some took voluntary redundancies fairly recently, and some had just moved to other positions, and those positions were never filled, so they reduced.
Sorry, you said there were 18 when you started in the role. Which role? You've had several.
As a senior inspector compliance, then it became manager compliance, manager liquor and gaming. We had
That's from 2008 then, is it?
as far as I can remember, we had between 18 to 21 when I was a shift inspector, and then from that period it started to reduce.
And what's the official complement at the moment?
Active shift inspectors on duty, 12. That's across all industries we regulate.
Yes.
I think the Commissioner's question might have been directed to how many positions there are, and I might direct your attention on page 7 of your witness statement. You've set out a
Yep.
diagram there
Yep.
that indicates your position, and then under it, there are 13
13.
positions. So there are 13 officially there, but then
Yep.
I note on the left, column 4 down, it says vacant. So
That's right.
One position is vacant. So
Correct.
can I take it that that position has been vacant for some time?
That is correct. And that's why we have 12 active. Sorry.
And is there a reason why that position wasn't filled, even though there's a position there?
You'd have to ask my director that question. I don't know.
So there's 13 positions, but only 12 of them are currently filled.
That's true. And may become less with some imminent retirements.
And just for the sake of clarity, when you refer to them being a shift inspector as opposed to an inspector, what's the significance of the shift inspector?
We only have shift inspectors,
Okay.
and we have for some time. There are no day shift inspectors. They are all shift inspectors on a ASA agreement.
And so the significance is that they will perform day and night shifts?
That is correct.
Now, just turning back, still up the CV. So the second dot point you include is develop and review of audit and inspection programs across all areas of regulated activity, undertake and coordinate investigations. Just ask you to explain what is the difference between audit and inspection programs for casino purposes.
Well, an audit is a more of an in-depth analysis of a particular casino operation, and obviously that may be a financial-based audit or an audit of the processes and procedures in place, and they're obviously governed by the casinos, the Commission's approved operating manual and procedures and authorised rules. So these audit programs are a bit more extensive to give us, so we draw to a reasonable level of assurance when we make our decisions as to whether they're compliant or not. And inspections are more of a quick sort of snapshot of whatever process and procedures that we're examining. It could be a table game audit or a table game inspection to inspections of an electronic gaming machine. Audits a little bit more thorough and detailed.
And just on those two examples you've given, what would an inspection of a table game be inspecting? What would you be doing?
To ensure that the game is being conducted in accordance with the approved rules and the procedures that apply to it, and that the personnel are wearing appropriate identification and they are engaged and trained to conduct and perform that game.
And for the electronic gaming machines, what would an inspection of an electronic
The
gaming
inspection
machine
of an electronic gaming machine would essentially, the inspector would check the HMAC SHA-1 signatures on the machine itself, the software, and would check that the theoretical return to player is what is at that the Commission approved, which is as a minimum of 90%. And that's brought up on screen, and the inspector verifies that to what was approved by the Commission at the time for that particular game type, the machine.
And I'm not sure I quite caught you. You referred to a particular type of signature?
HMAC SHA-1 signature. I'm not an IT expert, but that is like a significant, a code number, a serial number that relates to that game type. And when the Commission approved that game to be played at the casino, before the approval is given, the Commission require, through the national standards in gaming machines and the WA appendix, that that machine before approval must be tested and audited, inspected by an accredited testing facility. They're essentially experts in gaming technology, and they test and run, because EGMs are quite complex in nature, and there's really complex algorithms, so the ATFs are qualified to examine that, and with their tests of their software, they come up with these codes, these serial numbers, which are called HMAC SHA-1 signatures. So when the Commission approve these machines for use, and they're put out on the floor, the inspectors have those approvals because we have the records of what machines are approved, and a part of the inspection is to test that they match. So when it comes up on screen and we test that software, it should have the same HMAC SHA-1 signature that was approved by the Commission.
And as part of the inspection or audit process, do you inspect or audit Crown's bank accounts or the casino's bank accounts?
No.
And do you audit compliance with the casino directions?
Yes.
In what respect?
Well, the directions sits above all the approved, operating manuals and procedures. So essentially, our role is to ensure that the casino licensee complies with those directions. So part of our tests through all our numerous programs involve provisions in the directions that they must comply with. They are the audit and inspection programs that we do.
And when you've discussed, in your CV you set out that you develop and review audit and inspection processes. I'll first ask you, how do you go about developing audit and inspection processes?
Well, okay. What happened at the time, I think it was 2015, when the decision was made by the Commission to pull the inspectors out of the casino and have a different strategic approach to regulating the casino. One of those processes involved, or that strategy was that the strategic regulation team was three officers of that team, two of which were ex-casino gaming inspectors, were tasked with specifically developing audit and inspection programs going forward. And that was a collaborative effort between the regulatory services team, those three officers, and myself and inspectors. So when audit inspection programs were developed by the regulatory services team, what they would generally do is we would get a draft of it, and I would have an inspector give it a road test, and we'd check it out, and then if there were changes or adjustments that needed to be made to the program, we could make that. So it was a bit of a collaborative effort, and it was ongoing, because these inspection programs and audit programs over time need to be updated and adjusted as things change. So it was a collaborative effort between the operations division, compliance, and the regulatory services team. But they oversaw and took ownership of that. But we certainly had a hand in assisting in developing those. But the reg team mainly had management of that.
My second question was going to be, how did you go about reviewing the audit and inspection programs? But you might have already covered part of that, but if you'd like to elaborate.
Yeah, well, I guess the review is the ongoing review to see if it was still current or relevant, because the casino obviously has technological changes over the years where, it develops so fast where there's, changes to software, changes to processes, where the audit or inspection program might not be relevant to a specific test. So part of that review is to say if there was an amendment to a procedure that was recently made, that might mean that we may have to amend the test in the audit or inspection program to fall in line with the whatever that approval was. So that was part of that review.
Sorry, Mr. Sharp, you started this by saying that this occurred in 2015 when the decision had been taken to pull the inspectors from the floor. So can I take it that there were already programs, but you were really, because of the new reality, you were effectively starting again?
Yes, that's fair to say. Look, it may have been 2014 into 2015 when that development started of starting new and afresh with a whole look at how we do our role out there from a regulatory perspective. There were previously inspection programs and audit programs that existed, but a part of this new change was going forward, was reviewing and creating new audit and inspection programs in line with the strategy.
And then, if there's no further questions on that dot point, I'll move to the next dot point. The next dot point is identify regulatory risks and develop appropriate risk treatment plans. So what's the process for identifying regulatory risks?
Okay, when I took over in that role with my current position and the work of the Reg Services team, which I discussed, when that was underway, the whole plan was, and it was taken up, where we would meet on a monthly basis, officers from compliance, myself and my director, director from the licensing division and director from the regulatory service division and the deputy director general. We would meet monthly and we would examine the outcomes of all the audits and inspections that were done for that month. We maintained a compliance activity frequency chart and also an activity register where all the inspectors would enter the outcomes in short summary of all the audits and inspections done. That wasn't just for casino, that was for wagering, community gaming and liquor. And we would analyse that data or the outcome of all those inspections and audits, and that would give us an indication as to whether there were matters of non-compliance or fully compliant. And that's where we would find if there were areas where there was non-compliance, that's where we would target that might be more of a risk. And it might be, if it was an audit that we conducted once a month, might mean that we may need to change that frequency to perhaps do it weekly or fortnightly or every day, if that, depending on the seriousness of it. So that was part of identifying what potentially were high risks, was based on the outcomes of the audits and inspections that we performed.
Commissioners, that might be a convenient time.
Thank you. We will resume at 2 p.m. Thank you.